What up, what up, what up? Hello and welcome everyone to this 31st episode of the Backwards K Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Asbrock, and I am joined each episode by my lovely, esteemed co-host, Scott Kaiser. Scott, how are you doing tonight, my man?
Pressing too many buttons at the same time. Got to start it on the dual look to start the show. But other than that, I'm all right, man. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm not too bad. I mean, I know it's a little goofy here because it like it kind of froze up a little bit. That's where I was like in the middle of it. And like it sounded like, man, we going here? I mean, we're off to a flying start here in 2025. Man.
I guess when we don't have an interview scheduled, we don't know what to do with ourselves anymore.
I know. Yeah. It shows really where the quality of the show is. We gotta have a third person on here, otherwise we're in trouble. Don't look good.
No kidding.
Oh man. Well, I mean,
we're back, man. We're back.
Yeah, we are back. It's
we spent the last couple of weeks doing the college ball and talking with high schoolers, but we are officially back with spring training and full squad workouts starting this week. I clicked on a video just to hear the crack of the bat. It was the Dodgers doing BP, but the caption said hear that sweet sound, and I'm like, you know what, even if it's the Dodgers, I'm gonna go on ahead and do that.
You're gonna take it.
It was totally worth it.
Oh yeah.
Miss that sound, man. Miss it.
You know what my favorite is? The video that they always show from each camp of the pitchers and just the pop of the catcher's mitt, man. That just gets me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the video that gets me jacked up each and every time. Man. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's great.
It's a good time to be a baseball fan. The beginning of false hope for many of us.
Yeah. It's pretty much, I mean, it's February 17th, and just here in a few more weeks, we're going to be cussing at the televisions at our own team. So there's that. That's the beauty.
A few more weeks. As soon as these spring training games start, I get all worked up. So
I don't get as worked up in spring training. Well, I mean, I do, but
as
not
worked
as bad.
Up, but yeah,
as worked up. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know what I was sitting there thinking about the other day? Is next year a WBC year? Because I saw that they were doing some qualifiers this year, and I'm like,
2026.
That must mean, I was gonna say that must mean that we are on deck for another WBC. That's exciting because that means we got I was gonna say we've got a year to go until that. So this time next year we'll be staring down the barrel of some games that count. USA looking to get back that title from Japan. I'm excited for that. That'll be and with all of the Japanese imports, with all the pitchers, all of them going to the Dodgers, it makes it a much more familiar type thing, a little bit more heated, I think, when it comes to those matchups. When you recognize the faces, I feel like there's a little bit more intensity when we played like the Dominican Republic and whatnot. Because those are faces that you're used to seeing and knowing and kind of recognizing. And now that as the Asians get more integrated into Major League Baseball and are stars and faces that people know, like it's going to be a little bit more intense, because before it always just felt like, okay, playing Japan and you learning the team throughout the tournament and whatnot. But it'll be an interesting dynamic to have a whole bunch of Dodgers on the other side playing for Team Japan when it comes back around. So who knows? They'll probably spend this offseason grabbing whoever's the next big name up too. So,
oh yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time. But like you're talking about, that sense of the unknown is gone, and that's what it makes it. I mean, as great as it was, because watching that WBC, was it last year? Or was it? No, it was 2 years ago.
No, it would have been. It'll be 3 years ago come next year. So 2 years ago now.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, man, I'm all messed up. But yeah, watching that and seeing Sasaki pitch and
Yamamoto.
Yeah, Yamamoto. Watching those guys pitch in the WBC. So we saw them before. So again, it's a preview for basically for baseball fans to get to watch. Dodgers of the future is really what they're saying. That's what it comes down to, and it is what it is. But It's frustrating as hell, but
I was gonna say Team Japan is strictly, oh, look at all the future Dodgers. This is like the Dodgers, the Dodgers West, I guess you could say, or the Dodgers Far West.
Exactly. We can play the fun game of like guess the deferred money on each contract. Like
that. Now that's a game I'm into. How many deferred dollars for the next big thing in LA?
Exactly. Like we'll see. See.
A little closest to the pin competition.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Sasaki. Okay. Cool. Rentaro. Okay. Let's see.
I never even did see. I don't even think I ended up seeing the final numbers on Sasaki. Well, he didn't have to defer though, because his was like a minor league deal. Right?
His was all minor league deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So he didn't have some crazy number. That'll be his next one. I'm sure they've already stockpiled. They're getting ready for it
their negotiations already. They've got to be
to push that to 2040, whatever they've got to do.
Well, exactly. I mean, you have to got to plan ahead,
Well, before we get too far down the road of just rambling on about the Dodgers and bemoaning the fact that they've signed everybody in Major League Baseball the past couple of off seasons, we are going to get kicked off tonight with our season previews of each of the divisions. Tonight will be the AL East division preview, and we'll do one a week all the way until the start of the season. So tonight we'll get to talk about everybody's favorite teams in the AL East, which means I'll get to complain about the Yankees. We'll discuss the Red Sox resurgence, at least as far as it comes to making moves, and then, the bottom of the division with the Rays looking like they're going to shift back into taking a step back this year. But plenty to talk about, so let's just go on ahead and get things started. Let's start off with Baltimore. Baltimore finished last season with a 91-71 record. This was supposed to be the year they took that next step. They had, got new ownership there. They, looked like they had Corbin Burns, and it looked like the move that they had finally made to solidify things. And then they were swept by the Royals in the playoffs. First time they had been to the playoffs in back-to-back years since the heydays of the mid-90s. But same result. And then, they go into this offseason, and I feel like, Chris and I had spoken about it, but the general consensus seemed to be that Baltimore would be making a lot of moves. This was going to be the first real, offseason for the new ownership group and these guys who supposedly wanted to spend money, but instead, all they did was lose Santander. And one of their biggest hitters in that lineup, and replaced him with Tyler O'Neill. Not exactly a great 1-for-1. And then they signed Charlie Morton to the rotation to replace Corbin Burns. Again, not great as far as a 1-to-1 replacement. They also lost Danny Columbi in the bullpen. Eloy Jimenez left as well. But, basically losing two big pieces, one from the lineup and one from the rotation, and not really replacing them with anything of note. We thought that, the Orioles would be pretty much in on everyone. Turned out they were in on almost no one. Chris, your thoughts on Baltimore's offseason, and where do we think this team is headed in 2025?
It was definitely I'm going to say a C- offseason for the Orioles. Again, we had talked about it in the offseason shows previously that we had high expectations for them, and we did, because new ownership group comes in, you expect them to make the moves, and they just weren't there. And it's unfortunate because with a roster that is as young as what the Orioles have, a couple solid pieces to have in there would have been huge for them. And again, this was a team that finished second place, 3 games back of the Yankees, and nothing. And that's the frustrating part. So I feel really bad for Orioles fans because the expectations were there. Will they make the playoffs this year? Most likely. I just think the American League East is still. It's a nightmare division. I mean, it really, truly is. But the Orioles still have the talent. But when you lose an Anthony Santander and a Corbin Burns, those are your 2 big pieces that you lose. But to, like you said, Scott, to bring in a Charlie Morton, well, that cancels out Corbin Burns, by number alone, but not skill wise. And you've got Ramon Laureano that you just signed to a 1-year deal, and Tyler O'Neill. Those two aren't going to make up for the Anthony Santander, loss. So very underwhelming for the Baltimore Orioles. And that's the problem that you're going to see in Baltimore is they're going to feel that lack of depth and the lack of skill. I think ultimately when it comes down to it, as this season plays on, it's 162 games, but when you lose a lot of the talent that they did, and again, it was just two major players, but those are two big guys that you lost and you didn't make him up. And that's going to be the problem for the Orioles, unfortunately, for him in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think my problem with the Orioles isn't necessarily that they didn't spend the money, which, that was the expectation coming in this offseason. Okay, if you're not going to go that route, but you had to make moves of some type. They didn't make any trades. Season before the Corbin Burns thing, they got off some of their pieces and went out and brought him in. And, maybe they didn't want to do the 1-year rental and there wasn't anything out there that necessarily could replace a Corbin Burns that wasn't going to gut the farm system. But they've stockpiled all this talent and got all these guys. And, the last couple of years, these guys come up and they don't have much time or patience for them, mostly because they've got so many of them that it's easy to, shuffle them in between AAA and the bigs. But I feel like if you're going to do that, and, if they finally had moved Connor Norby at the trade deadline last year, but, Heston Kjerstad and some of these guys that are Kobe Mayo are just, kind of waiting in the wings, knocking on the door, but can't get the chance in Baltimore because they've got, pretty much the everyday lineup kind of set. And aren't doing you any good if they're just raking in AAA. Should have moved some of those pieces. Found a way to replace the Santander with somebody a little bit more stable. Or if you don't trust these guys to necessarily take over on an everyday basis, you had to have done something. And it just feels like even though they've got a lot of really young talent, and again, like you mentioned, they should be fine going into this season. From a talent standpoint, just being able to get back to the playoffs, but you didn't get better. So there's no reasonable expectation that you do anything other than get swept again in the playoffs. The same thing you've done the last 2 years. Now, plenty of time in between now and the end of the season and the trade deadline. And it's not saying that they can't make any moves, but the offseason is when you make generally your biggest moves until the trade deadline. And a team like Baltimore that's ready to win, and a city that's ready to explode and get behind these Orioles, like they're already there, but they've been burnt by the Angelos family and the previous ownership group not spending money forever, and now the beginning of this one looks like more of the same. So hopefully there's still moves to be made by Baltimore in between now and October. Otherwise, we're looking at another one and done situation.
Well, I think that's my biggest gripe about it is the fact that when you get a team that's right there and ready to win right now and to take that extra step in the playoffs and you don't do anything, that's the part that makes me, that really annoys me, because as a GM, like I said, your team's right there and you were ready with one. I mean, just because you lost to Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander isn't the end of the world. Like I said, this team's got talent. They're okay talent-wise, but they're just okay. They'll get to the playoffs on talent alone. They need a couple other pieces to take them beyond that. That's what they need, because this team is ready to win now and for the next couple of years. So to not do anything about it, and I think, like I said, the free agent part of it, okay, it is what it is. Like that's, sometimes you're bidding, dollar-wise against some of these crazy teams that are willing to completely outspend you, and that's fine, and it's not a big deal. But when you've got the prospect capital like you do, utilize that. I mean, these guys, like you said, they're sitting in the minors, wasting away, and if you don't have the spots for them in the major league, lineup, Utilize that and go bring in a top tier starter or an all-star outfielder, something like that. That's what you've got to bring in. And they didn't do any of that. And I think that's the biggest complaint that I have is just a lack of movement. I think trade-wise, I think was probably my biggest frustration because that prospect capital is there. You got to utilize that, cash in on it, and go bring in, incredibly quality pieces. Even if you go, make a big deal for at that time a Garrett Crochet and a Luis Roberts, something like that. Those guys together, something to, bolster the lineup. Instead, you sit there and they go, some of these guys go to other teams and you're sitting on your hands. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and when their top competition in the division, New York, did all of the things this offseason after, failing to re-sign Soto, we'll get to them in just a little bit, it makes it look even worse for Baltimore because, those two went toe-to-toe, battled it out throughout the summer, and Baltimore did fade and end up losing out on the division to or did they end up losing the division? Or did they come
back? They were 3 games back.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I thought that they ended up losing the division there at the end. And so, when you watch the team that you competed with go out and add pieces despite losing a Juan Soto, like I said, it makes the offseason feel a lot worse in addition to what you didn't do. So I feel for the folks in Baltimore, but like I said, they got Grayson Rodriguez. They've still got Gunnar Henderson. They've got these really young, bright stars, and hopefully they can put it all together and we'll be eating our words come October. But I still think that they've got to do something to solidify the entire team come midseason at the trade deadline, or again, you're going to run into another disappointing finish come October. And the goal is not just to get there. If you're Baltimore, this would be the 3rd straight year. Like the expectation is to advance and win the World Series with this core.
And I think that's the interesting part is, with what they've lost, where they are early on in the season, how that builds from, throughout April. Okay. Like they say, you can't win a division in April, but you can sure as hell lose it. So, how do you get through April? How you get through May? And then you start to get into the summer months and see where this team is. Because if they're right there, and how they could be, you never know what's going on, with this division. Like I said, it's a murderer's row. It is each and every season, despite some of these teams being down. Boston's been down the last couple of years. Okay, that's fine, but it's still a tough division. They're still not an easy out. So depending on where they are, what do the Orioles do? Do they go out and do they make a huge move? Do they deal some of those prospects for quality players to bring in at the deadline to move forward and hopefully take this team to the next step? It's got to happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm rooting for them to do it because despite everything that the rest of the division did, I still think that the Orioles are the number one challenger to the Yankees, having won that division. But let's move on to the other team that made quite a bit of noise this offseason for the first time in a while. You mentioned the Boston Red Sox. Last year they finished 500 at 81-81. It was another year of disappointment after, years of spending freely and being in the conversation every offseason and going toe-to-toe with the Yankees and any other big spenders, getting in on all the high-priced free agents. They took a step back from that for a while. Not necessarily the route they took this time, as they traded for Garrett Crochet from the White Sox, who looks to be one of their top pitchers coming in this season, assuming he builds on what he did last year. They signed Walker Buehler to a 1-year deal. And then everybody kind of forgets, but Lucas Giolito was a signing of theirs at the beginning of last offseason, then ended up having Tommy John, didn't pitch at all. So, they've got 3 new pieces in the rotation, essentially. They brought in Aroldis Chapman to anchor the back end, and they really didn't lose a whole lot. Nick Pivetta signed in San Diego. They lost a couple of bullpen guys, but for the most part, O'Neill going over to the Orioles is kind of a loss, but not really, not one that they can't absorb. But I think the big question is going to be, can Garrett Crochet stay healthy? And is he the ace that we saw in the making last year? Or, does he take a step back in his second full season, assuming that he can stay healthy? I think I like what the Red Sox did a lot. We didn't even mention the fact that they brought in Bregman recently, because that just happened. So they did bring in Alex Bregman on the free agent deal. Forgot as long as that saga went on, but that'll be an interesting piece to add there. Paid him a lot of money for 3 years. He'll be making around $40 million nearly each year for the next 3. But a lot of moving parts for Boston. They definitely got better. It will just kind of depend on how everything clicks. I like the moves. Thought they had a pretty good offseason, and I'm interested to see what Boston can do this year. I think they're going to be a nuisance more so for Baltimore. Won't make it as easy for them to get back to where they want to be. So what says you about the Boston Red Sox and what they did this offseason?
I think they had a great offseason. I really do. I think, to cap it off with Alex Bregman, which that move made the most sense in terms of, him going to another market outside of Detroit. I mean, Detroit to me made, that was the perfect landing spot for him. But Boston was, USA scored. Sorry. I got caught watching
hockey.
4 Nations face-off, baby. 35 seconds in. Now we're talking. Okay. There we go. Now he got me buzzing here for this. Oh, man, I'm ready. Oh, all righty. But going back to the Red Sox, though, but again, the addition of Alex Bregman, Garrett Crochet, and I think what they have done was they said, screw it, and we are going to go back to being a force in this division, which, going out and making a move of bringing in a Garrett Crochet helps solidify you brought in your ace. Now, if he can return to that form, you're in great shape, and you bring in an Alex Bregman, who they only brought him in on a 3-year deal, but okay, that's fine. You've got him for, a couple years. Perfect. Utilize that, because you still got, looking at the lineup, you've got Jarren Duran on left, Rafael Devers at third, Bregman. Well, they've got this year, MLB's got Devers at third, Bregman at second, but then you still got Tristan Casas at first, who has been talked about being dealt, but they've kept him. You still got Yoshida, as your DH and outfielder. There's some guys, but I think the one move, and I said it when it was made early on, was the Walker Buehler signing. I think that is a sneaky, massive addition for this ball club, because they've got him listed on here. I think this is on MLB.com. They got him listed as their 4th starter. So they've got Garrett Crochet, Tanner Houck, Brian Bello, Walker Buehler, and Lucas Giolito as their 5 in the rotation. If Walker Buehler is your 4th, coming off of a solid postseason like he had, he was the reason, that the Dodgers nailed down that World Series towards the end. His play was phenomenal, and that's exactly what he needed. So you're going to now get Walker Buehler on a 1-year prove-it deal. Count me in. And I think that is going to be, like I said, a sneaky, massive signing for this Boston Red Sox ball club, again, along with the other additions that they made. They didn't lose anybody huge. So, it's really more, you're bringing in a lot more solid pieces. And then another guy they brought in, we all made fun of it at the beginning, was the Aroldis Chapman deal. That kind of kicked everything off in free agency, was Aroldis Chapman. It's like, okay, who knows? If Chapman can return to, find some form that he had a couple years back, that's another solid piece in your bullpen. But overall, like I said, Boston said screw it, and they're going to go back to being, that's their vision of being a force in the AL East, and I think they've taken a huge step forward in that. And I still think that if they're there, over the summer, which I think they will, and I'm predicting the Red Sox to finish second in this division, I think, you could see some more moves being made to really nail down this ball club and, have a very successful postseason run. But again, I really do like what Boston has done. I really do.
And we haven't even spoken about what is coming in the pipeline for Boston, because they have three of the top prospects in the game in the form of Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, and Marcelo Meyer. These guys are all going to be household names sooner rather than later. And it makes it so that Boston, not only do they have everything stocked and ready to go at the major league level at this moment, but should anybody falter or stumble or anything along those lines, if they just decide the kids are ready to play, they've got these three studs ready to go in the minors, which should propel them, even further into the future. I think a lot's going to rest this season specifically, though, on that rotation. If the rotation can pitch well, that's going to determine everything. Because I think last year, the Red Sox had a playoff caliber offense. That wasn't the problem. It was more so that their pitching situation was not up to the level of being able to consistently win games. They still made noise. I mean, for having such a down year, still being able to finish 500 in the AL East, in the AL East is nothing to sneeze at. That's not an easy task, having to play all those games against all of those formidable opponents. But again, had they had more consistent pitching, then I think it's going to be more similar to what you'll see this year, where it's going to be a three-way battle between New York, Boston, and Baltimore. Yeah. And I'm curious and excited to see who comes out on top, because I can make a compelling argument for each of the teams to do so. So hopefully Boston, like I said, can stay healthy and keep that rotation ready to go. All right, moving on to them. We do have to talk about the Yankees offseason, which began with much celebration as Juan Soto decided to sign in New York. The other New York team, though. Juan Soto is out. He is with the New York Mets now, and that brought me much joy. I thought, hey, that's a good way to start off the offseason. It then led the Yankees to go out and spread the money around that they would have spent on Juan Soto to quite a few players, one of them being Max Fried. They traded for Devin Williams. They brought in Cody Bellinger. They brought in Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, there are a bunch of new names in New York going to be interested to get out. Is Gleyber Torres, Anthony Rizzo, Alex Verdugo's gone. They traded away Nestor Cortez in the Devin Williams deal. Clay Holmes also signed with New York. But they brought in Fernando Cruz from the Reds. They added added a few other pieces in the back of the bullpen. I hate that I have to admit this, but I think the Yankees had one hell of an offseason. And I think that not signing Juan Soto was probably the best thing that could have happened to them. And I heard people say that as soon as it did happen, and little did I know that they would be right and all in the worst way possible for me, with Max Fried taking the money that they had put out there, and now he's in pinstripes, and that sucks for this Atlanta Braves fan. But neutrally, I have to say that I very much enjoyed all the moves that the Yankees made, and I think they're a better team now than they were at the end of last season in the World Series. And you add on the fact that Jazz will have a full season in New York. All these the guys that they brought in there have the full off season to get ingrained and everything. I like this team a lot to repeat, but they're definitely going to be battling it day in and day out as at the top of that division. I just hope they don't run away with it. I hope that they have to consistently look over their shoulders and keep their foot on the gas if they are going to win the division and repeat. I want them to have to go through hell to get there. Your thoughts on the Yankees offseason and what Brian Cashman did to retool this franchise?
I'm 100% with you, but first things first, Scott, I'm very proud of you.
What's that?
I know that absolutely killed you
I know.
Say this. But I'm proud of you, though. That was a big step, and you are really.
Hey, look,
pundit hat is great. It's awesome.
I was just gonna say it's very rare that I can admit and be objective and just talk ball when it comes to either New York team and slightly Philadelphia. There's very heavy bias against those teams, so it's hard for me to give them praise. And I know that sometimes some of the critical things I say about them comes off as probably harsher than it should, but I got to give them credit when they have a good off season and they do some things that I'm like, damn, those are really good moves, especially within the context of their team. They got younger. They got rid of some of that dead weight. Now, of course, Giancarlo Stanton's already having issues with his elbow as, Camp, both elbows, I believe, as camp gets underway. So some things never change there with injuries and some of the guys that they have. But, they phased some of those guys out and they brought in some really good guys. I mean, God, I love Devin Williams and obviously I love Max Fried. So, yeah, it sucks, but they're going to be a force to be reckoned with again, and I really like their offseason. So
no, they did. They like I said, the way it came across was, oh man, again, like you said, the loss of Juan Soto is, if they don't do a couple moves to really build this team back up, then it's a massive loss. Well, they went above and beyond that. They really did. Brian Cashman is, he's a hell of a GM. He really is. And he just continues to, to build these teams that are solid. And he didn't go out there and they didn't go and blow a ton of money. They,
well, you said
it was a non-Yankee offseason,
Yeah, you give Cashman credit on that. And I will say that this might be the first time in a while that I think he's actually done a good job of GMing. I think he's actually been kind of bad at his job.
No, over the last couple years,
Right, yeah. Like this was the first one that I'm like, not only was he forced to make moves, he didn't blow his load on, one or two contracts that you're just like, yeah, that's not going to age well, or it's going to. I mean, who's to say how Max Fried will ultimately age out at the end of that contract? But in the short term, in the next, I'd say 4 years of Max, you're going to get a premium pitcher, and they paid what he was worth. It wasn't an overpay. And then, they spread the money around to the other guys and brought in pieces that, if a Goldschmidt doesn't work, 1 year thing, he's out. No super long-term commitments to guys that you're like, yeah, that won't age well.
Well, that's the thing is, if you win a World Series, nobody gives a shit about how these contracts age anyway.
Absolutely.
That's just, that's how it is. And, he, like I said, he's a hell of a GM. He always has been. Now, this offseason, like you said, Scott, and you nailed it on it. The fact that this is probably one of his best jobs that he has done in years. Man, it's been a long time, and and good on him. I mean, that pressure was there to, people were pissed that they lost Soto, but they went out there and my God, they did a hell of a job in filling this roster up. Now, bringing in an aging player like Paul Goldschmidt, but it's only a 1 year deal.
Yeah, so, if it was longer than 1 year. Yeah, I was gonna say you traded peanuts to get him, and no matter what, he's gone after the end of this year. If he's truly done, hell, I could see them releasing him before the end of this season. If he's as bad as everybody says he is, I think. But I do think that Goldschmidt, being one of those guys that he's been throughout his career, he will muster and find a way to have one more year where he's not going to be prime MVP Paul Goldschmidt. He's not going to, blow anybody's socks off, but between 260, 270, 20 some home runs, just clutch hits. I could see
productive as hell.
Easily. Yeah,
what it is.
Just classically productive and not a MVP type way, but in a way that you're just like, damn it, Paul still had just a little bit left in the tank.
That's the thing.
Because that's what I'll be saying. Damn it, when I see highlights of Paul Goldschmidt in pinstripes doing things that helps them win.
I mean, you look at their lineup. I mean, Jason Dominguez projected to lead off. That's solid. Aaron Judge again. Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge, batting second. Behind him, Cody Bellinger. Now it's not Juan Soto, but Cody Bellinger can get the job done.
As long as he's not hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. Stanton. Now that's another wild card. So that's the thing is they've got two guys. Your 3 and 4 hitters in Bellinger and Stanton, they're wild cards. If they're healthy, the Yankees are in great shape. But if they're not, oh man, that could be a big problem. That could be something that helps, derail a very solid season for this Yankees team if these two guys aren't, if they can't stay healthy and on the field. Jazz Chisholm is one. I have not been a fan of Jazz. I'm not.
And I love Jazz, but if you want to talk about somebody staying healthy, he's the beacon of not staying healthy.
Yeah.
Last year, he was relatively healthy. Now, when New York traded for him, he almost immediately got hurt, which was very Jazz Chisholm of him.
Yeah.
But for the year in a whole, it was a rare year that he was pretty healthy for the most part. I imagine that this year he'll revert back because that's what Jazz has done. You can't.
He hasn't proven otherwise.
Well, and it's always something catastrophic too. It's never like minor dings and 10-day stints. We're talking like back issues that keep him out for 60 days or stress fractures or whatever it may be. He gets hurt and he misses large amounts of time. That's the thing. This Yankees team is on paper, very good, and the moves that they made were very solid. But if you start looking beneath the surface, and if injuries do and injuries can derail any team, yes, I understand. But some of the guys that the Yankees have are just a little bit more injury prone than others. And because the margin for error will be so slim with Baltimore and Boston right there on their heels, it could be the difference between a wild card and winning division, just those couple of guys. So,
in looking at this lineup, man, it's an old ass lineup, dude.
It is. Age wise, it's very old.
Yeah. You get DJ LeMahieu, who is another one who can't stay healthy.
Right.
So you got him. You've got Goldschmidt, Stanton, Bellinger. These guys are older and haven't proven health-wise that they can stay up, man. So we look at it and we're saying, oh man, we're giving them all this praise, which they deserve. But man, it's close to, a couple dominoes fall. This could be a rough season for the Yankees, man. In looking at it, one thing they can fall back on.
I think that their offense would suffer a little, but I think they solidified the pitching. I think the pitching's much better than it was.
Just going to go to that because I said
so. That
this rotation is nasty.
Yeah,
you got Garrett Cole, nice. Max Fried, Carlos Rodon, Luis Gil, who was Rookie of the Year, and Clark Schmidt and Marcus Stroman. Stroman is your sixth starter.
But make sure he's a starter. He's not a reliever. He's a starter.
Well, that's why I threw him in.
He wants the whole world. He wants the whole
world. I don't want him mad at me. That's why I said it. I don't want him mad at me. I like him. I don't want him mad.
For those of you who don't know, Marcus Stroman this week was asked about potentially pitching out of the bullpen by one of the writers in New York, and he definitively stated that he was a starter multiple times. Yeah. My favorite was the reporter asking him if that was a message to Brian Cashman. And he said, no, it's just look at my whole career. I'm a starter.
Yeah.
I'm just stating
he's not wrong. Yeah, I ain't wrong. Geez, it's hilarious, man. But, but if he's your sixth starter, they've got a solid rotation.
Yeah.
And if those guys, if they stay healthy, which, again, pitchers, each and every year are going to get hurt. That's just part of it. But again, they've got some dudes, man. So again, I think, this is going to be a season where they're going to have to win games, 5-4, that type of situation, because the pitching staff is going to keep the games, low. They're not going to. Yeah. Based off that rotation, what you see on paper, they're not going to give up a lot of runs.
No.
Now, what are you going to get from that offense is the big question.
Yeah. I have a feeling the offense might be very up and down and inconsistent because, Judge
they're
for the
most
part.
They're going to be streaky.
Yeah, I was going to say, Judge for the most part, he's in the lineup, but every now and then he can battle some things too. I just have a feeling that what you're going to see with them is they'll never have that lineup that you're looking at right now. That lineup will play like probably 20 games together the entire season, right? Just because of
the key is Judge is out of center field. Judge is now in right field.
Sure.
So that's going to be huge. Now you got,
he's got that plantar fasciitis issue too that, that isn't going away and it can't be resolved. It's like, and it crops up occasionally on him and can keep him out for a couple weeks at a time here and there. But I don't put him in the injury prone category. Oh, I do too. And
dude, it sucks.
when I realized that I had it, I was like, oh, now I understand why guys can't really play.
I was just going to say, I was like,
well, now I can't rip on them. Good until you sit down for 10 minutes and then all of a sudden it feels like your leg's broken when you go to stand back up.
God, man, I'm sitting there and I was like, because I just saw something, I forget what it was a couple weeks ago, and they were like, so-and-so's out with plantar fasciitis, and I was like, no shit. Like, yeah. I get it. I understand. I can't get mad now. Like, suck it up. No, you can't.
One of those imaginary injuries kind of before. Like, I think of a lot of football players. You would hear about it. Just like plantar fasciitis, get out there. There's no way guys are getting broken bones and all this, and you're not playing because your feet hurt. Get out there. Now I get it. Like there's there's no playing because the minute you stop for a second, it's when it all falls apart. You're good to go as long as you're moving, but when you stop, it's over.
It's miserable. I'm like, man, this is getting old shit, dude. It ain't fun, man. Like it ain't fun. I understand now. So yeah.
So the Yankees will have to keep the Bengay nearby, but assuming that they could stay in the ice baths and keep their brittle bones intact, they're going to be in line probably to win this division again.
That's where I've got them.
I'm going to probably ultimately end up there, but.
I don't want to.
I don't want to get there now. Maybe I can spend the rest of my episode talking myself into somebody else. But it might be hard because as we move from the Yankees, we go to the Rays. Poor Rays. They're coming in. Last year was a rough year, a down year for them. They finished 80 and 82. We all know about the Wander Franco thing that happened just before the end of the season prior, but that kind of was still a cloud over this past season. Hard to move on from your first real franchise signing and the way that went down. And then you're losing guys to injury and whatnot. And then they traded Randy Arozarena to Seattle at the deadline. They got rid of Jose Siri. Jeffrey Springs got traded to the A's, and then the revolving door that is their bullpen, turned once more, losing 3 members there. The good news is they're the Rays. And the Rays seemingly have these down years, and there's a down couple years. Now, this one, I think the time frame might have been sped up a little bit because of the Wander Franco thing. But at some point, just based on the way that they operate and the way that they handle contracts and move things around, they tend to go in 3-year windows and then kind of have a little bit of a reset. I think we're in the reset years. I don't expect too much from the Rays. The fact that they were able to finish just 2 games under 500 was probably a little bit of luck. But they got some kids coming up like they always do. They signed Ha-Seong Kim. He's not going to be ready until about end of May, beginning of June. But he's definitely a Rays type guy. The excitement of Junior Caminero, coming into his own. Everybody's seen the Caribbean Series down there where he blasted the big home run and took about 20 minutes to round the bases. But a lot of excitement surrounding him this year. And then, you've got Shane O'Mac. Shane McClanahan's coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's a big piece of their rotation and their future seemingly. So there are things to look forward to and get excited. But ultimately, they also have to deal with the fact that they will play their home games any minor league ballpark because the hurricane tore off the roof to Tropicana Field, and it will not be ready until God knows when, maybe not even till the beginning, possibly, of next season, to be able to be played in. So they'll be playing all their home games in spring training complex of the Yankees. Not great, Bob. Not great when you don't get to play your home games in your regular home and you're playing at the home of your spring training complex for your rivals. I think it's going to be a very lost year for the Rays, but I suspect that there will be flashes and things to point to that this time next year we'll be thinking, well, the Rays are ready to take off, or they're right in the spot where they want to be because they've made moves. Because that's the thing too. Rays, no matter what they look like now, they'll overhaul everything. And this time next year, we'll be looking at, a completely new roster almost, as far as like the starters and the names to know. So your thoughts on the Rays and what they're staring down the barrel of in 2025?
It's going to be a rough season for the Rays, but again, they are the Tampa Bay Rays. They find ways each and every season. Somehow they seemingly will pull, the rabbit out of the hat, and they're an organization that does incredible, like, advanced scouting with a lot of these players. They bring in guys who are, I guess, like rejects of other teams, and they bring them in and they turn them into studs. That's just what the Rays do. They turn, basically they spit shine turds is kind of what they do, and they do a hell of a job doing it. What's that?
It's a hell of a visual.
I mean, yeah, they're just that organization that, I think a lot of teams really need to aspire to be them, because that just of what they do organizational wise, from the top down. Now, if they had a quality, ownership group behind them that's willing to throw money as well behind a lot of it, then they would be truly unstoppable. But, they don't. But they do an incredible job with what they're given, and they go above and beyond that as well. So, but in looking at this, this lineup, it's still, I mean, there's some quality guys on there. I mean, Yandy Diaz at first, Brandon Lowe second, Caminero at third, Josh Lowe in right, Christopher Morel in left, Jonathan Aranda, DH, Danny Jansen is one they brought in. He's their starting catcher, Johnny DeLuca, and Taylor Walls. Again, that's not a bad lineup. I mean, there's some guys in there. They're going to get plenty of wins. I just think there's a lot of other factors that are going to go along, with it, that are going to, kind of make things more difficult. I mean, last year the Rays were 80-82, 14 games back of the Yankees in this division. So again, just 2 games under 500. But it's, this is another team where the pitching staff is solid. And that's, and looking at what they've got, Shane McClanahan, like you said, is back. There's your ace. Drew Rasmussen, Ryan Pepio, Shane Baz, and Taj Bradley are your 5 starters. That's a pretty solid
really like the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, it's solid. So the Rays are going to be good. They're not going to be a team that's, 15 games under 500. They're going to be hovering around 500. They're going to be in the mix. I just don't think they're going to have enough to make it past, what's needed to get into the playoffs. I just think there's too much to overcome.
I just thought of something that would just be one of the funniest things that could happen in baseball, probably ever. Could you imagine if the Rays playing in their, in the minor or in the spring training complex for New York, somehow met up with the A's playing at the minor league complex there in Sacramento in the playoffs? Obviously, they couldn't meet in the World Series, because I honestly thought about how funny it would be in the World Series. But a ALCS featuring 2 homeless teams playing at stadiums, like what would they? Because there's no way that baseball would allow the games, the playoff games, to be played at those respective stadiums. Now, obviously, the expectation is that those two teams aren't going to reach that point, and they'll never have to think about it. But by God, this would be if the baseball gods in the universe.
I was going to say
something just absolutely hysterical. They would make sure that there's playoff baseball in Tampa Bay and Sacramento between the A's and the Rays. God, I need this to happen now.
Crazier things have happened. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, it would just be incredible to watch Major League Baseball have to scramble and figure out where they're going to host those games, because you can't host them at minor league. You couldn't host playoff games at a minor league park.
Could you imagine that?
Trading complex game. Got folks sitting out in the grass in the outfield. Playoff game.
What an atmosphere. Oh, my Lord.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, no.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think you would end up moving. I mean, logistically, you would probably, you would move the A's to San Francisco and move them back to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
To play that. And then I think you would just send the Rays down to Miami.
Yeah, you'd have to.
I think that's, logistically, because otherwise,
yeah,
that would absolutely it's amazing.
Be the choice, but could you imagine that?
It would be perfect.
Two teams playing and two other teams again. And then what if you had not likely that the Marlins would be there, but what if the Giants somehow surprised everybody and made the playoffs and you'd be like, oh no, I guess in that place they would probably send them to San Diego, right? Maybe LA. I don't know.
Anaheim, because the Angels won't be there. So, there we go.
I'll get Artie Moreno some gate in October.
Help him out.
Rays looking at not a lost season, but just a tough battling uphill all year season. Again, though, this Rays franchise and this team, the fact that they didn't finish dead last year and only 2 games out of 500, off 500, I fully expect that they will finish within 10 games of being close to 500. Like, they're not going to be any worse than 10 games away from under 500.
No. And I tell you what, man, and looking back, I feel bad for Tampa, man. Like they were dealt a crap sandwich. They really were, with starting off with the Wander Franco thing. You spend all this money on, it's supposed to be your franchise guy, and he goes and pulls that shit, and then it's just like, oh my,
and then the hurricane.
Yeah, it's like the one guy they go, throw their money at, who, like I said, is, your one franchise guy, and then that comes back to bite you. And then you got the hurricane to top it off. It's just, man, you do feel really bad for Tampa. It's like they can't catch a break over these last couple of years, man. But again, it's, the Rays, they're resilient as hell. They really are. It's
and impressive. as a franchise, and anybody who's worked there for a time, because you had said something earlier that I thought was, there have been teams that have tried. The Rays are one of the franchises that other teams aspire to be like and try to emulate, and they cannot capture it.
They can't.
I'm talking about teams that throw money at guys.
Yeah.
Cannot capture the magic that the Rays seem to have with scouting, trading for, and developing players to turn them into, a team that contends on a semi-annual basis. Like, no team can generally do that. Like, most teams go the route of the Braves and the Astros of tearing it all down to the studs, and then 3 or 4 years later, after drafts and doing all the maneuvering, then you start to see the fruits of that. But Tampa Bay never really does it like that. Like, they never really go down to the studs. They just kind of move off of whatever guys that have any type of value before they know, hey, we're not going to be able to pay these guys. So, and they turn those guys into useful pieces every single time. Like, it's uncanny.
It's truly incredible. That's the thing. Yeah.
It would be nice. It would be nice if the other Florida team could emulate them at least. Like, if Miami could do something similar, being in a similar situation, being in the same state and struggling with money and attendance and all that, it would be nice to have the identity of Florida baseball being two teams that, hey, we can just build our way out of this through, drafting and scouting and all that other stuff. But nice that the Rays are able to do that, and they're not just a continual doormat in the AL East.
Yeah, it's every couple years they're right there towards the top, and then like you said, it's cyclical with them, but they're never like way down and out.
Right,
and that's the crazy part about it.
They never have a White Sox type season.
I can say that, yes,
completely bottom out.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, it might be like a 70 and 92 season or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Which is it's brutal, to look at, but that's.
But comparative to really bad teams, it's not. Yeah. It's not that awful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we wrap up the AL East before we get into our predictions of where everybody will finish and kind of putting a bow on the whole thing with the Toronto Blue Jays, who finished in the basement of the East last year. And even though they finished rock bottom in the division, it was more just a rock bottom feeling around this regime, this core, just in general. Nothing seemed to go right for the Blue Jays last year. They've struggled each and every offseason for the past few years, whiffing on bringing in Ohtani, whiffing this offseason on bringing in Soto. And Chris and I were talking about it before the show. Toronto had a dreadful offseason. Until about 3 weeks ago, if you asked anybody, Toronto had probably one of the worst off seasons, if not the worst, of all of Major League Baseball. And then something weird happened. They made a couple of moves. The dust kind of settled. And we look up, and actually Toronto didn't have quite a bad off season. Now, it wasn't the one the fans wanted. It wasn't the one that most people think that they should have had. Just from a names and movement standpoint, but they were able to bring in Anthony Santander to get in the outfield. He's not going to hurt their lineup. They traded for Andres Jimenez from Cleveland, and then later they made a deal for Miles Straw to bring him in as well. They're glove first guys, but they're useful. And in Jimenez's case, I think there's a little bit more still there too as far as offense. And then the Max Scherzer signing was a surprise to everybody, but we all know who Max Scherzer is, what he's capable of, and if he's healthy, that's a huge help. And then they fortified the bullpen. We'll see what's up with Jeff Hoffman. The reports are that he failed a bunch of physicals, and Toronto just, that was their first signing, and it seemed like they were just like, thank God somebody took our money. But if he's healthy, that's a great pickup. I like Hoffman a lot. And they didn't really lose anybody. Like, it felt like they lost a lot of guys. They lost Jordan Romano, but that was by choice. His injury, but they didn't really lose any big names. It was more so that they didn't sign any big names, and I think it was more you lose Shohei, who they went all in on, and then Soto, who again they went all in on, and it was just this overwhelming feeling of this regime up there. It's on their last year. This is the last year of that, and then we haven't re-signed Vladdy to a long-term deal, which is still the case. And you started looking forward, and it's like, this thing is all they were looking to tear it all down and restart with the studs. But now I feel like Toronto is in a prime spot that at least they won't finish last in the division by virtue of Toronto or Tampa Bay being there. But I think that the Jays can surprise some people if their pitching can hold up.
Well, last year, the pitching wasn't the problem for them. They had a really good pitching staff. It was their offense that was brutal. Surely to God, this offense is not going to be as bad as it was last year. And looking at the lineup.
Bichette is going to have a bounce back. I'm rubber stamping that now.
1,000%.
My
1,000% with you.
my man was hurt. You could tell there was something wrong with him the whole year. He didn't look himself. He batted 225, his mid 220. He was like a 300 average guy.
Yeah,
his entire career to that point. There's no way that he struggles that badly. So that alone is going to help this offense.
And and we talked about it pre-show. I mean, we were, I popped on with you and I was like, man, Toronto had a pretty damn good offseason, and looking at it, and they really did. And George Springer, he's older, obviously. If you can take, a lot of the load off of him, he's going to produce. You got Bo Bichette again. Bo's going to bounce back. Vladdy is going to be Vladdy. Anthony Santander is going to be DH outfield, depending on what happens with, him supplementing George Springer and Wright. Those two can flip-flop back and forth. But you know what you're going to get from Anthony Santander. You got Alejandro Kirk, catching. Kirk can hit. You've got Dalton Varsho, who still unknown if he's going to be ready by opening day. Shoulder-wise, he is hurt. But, defensively, Dalton Varsho is one of the best that you're going to get in the outfield. Big trade bringing him in, offensively, if he can step it up, that'll be, solid for him. Andres Jimenez, again, what you're going to get with Andres Jimenez. He's at second base. You got Ernie Clement and then Joey Loperfido in left field. If this team can score runs, they're going to be in really good shape, because pitching wise, they're going to be there. Jose Barrios, Kevin Gossman, Chris Bassett, Max Scherzer, and Belton Francis, with Yariel Rodriguez as kind of a six-starter ready to step in whenever. This rotation is solid. The Max Scherzer addition, I think, that's an intriguing one, because if you get the Max Scherzer that we all know, then you're adding a lot to this, this rotation, and somebody that these guys can learn from. It's invaluable. So that's a move that could be, sneaky good. It's kind of like, oh, okay, well, Max Scherzer's to Toronto. Cool. Now what? And, I think if depending on, what happens with the Vladdy situation, which right now they're still ongoing talks trying to get him signed, which to me shouldn't take this long and never should have got to this point. But alas, here we are. If you can get Vladdy re-signed, then you have completely salvaged everything going forward, because that is the biggest piece. He is the piece that you simply cannot let go. And you have to bring him back. Plain and simple, it's a must. So Toronto, if you can bring him back here relatively soon, within, hopefully, get something worked out before, the start of the season, then that completely changes the light of, this franchise right now. The problem you've got is you've got a front office who are on contracts that are expiring. They're done at the end of this year. So God only knows moving forward. But looking back at this Toronto team, and I'm someone who I follow the Toronto Blue Jays, religiously. This offense is not going to be as bad as it was last year, and I firmly stand by that. How good are they going to be is going to be the big question. If they can up their production, I mean, hell, you don't have to up it much from last year to be in a much better spot. But if you can get yourself in, I don't even know, maybe 2 or 3 runs more than what you were scoring last year, you're going to win a lot of ball games because your pitching staff is that good. So again, they didn't lose much. They brought in quality pieces over the last couple of weeks, which changed the whole trajectory of this offseason and made it a successful offseason for the Toronto Blue Jays. There were talks that, being in on Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman. Could you imagine if they had brought in one of those two guys, what that could have done? Then you're talking about a team that's going to compete for first in the division, outside of one that's hopefully, a wild card team at best. but still, all is not lost in Toronto. Again, this team it's solid. They just need that offense to bounce back from a abysmal 2024 and get back to the 2023 levels and before. And they're going to be in great shape.
I agree. They also need to bounce back from one of their former aces in Kevin Gausman. It'd be nice if Kevin Gausman got back. He had a down year last year. If you can get him back on track to what he was before, again, that's another big piece to kind of add to the mix when you're talking about that rotation and then being able to prevent runs. So that is going to wrap up what the previews and the looks of all the divisions. So, Chris, I go to you. Let's go ahead and give the folks what we think will be the final standings in the AL East. I'll let you lead that off.
I've got the Yankees winning the division. Again, from everything we just said, I got the Yankees, and then I've got Boston. Baltimore, simply because of, what we had said, they just didn't add enough. So Boston's going to jump them, and then Toronto in fourth, and then followed up by the Rays in fifth. So New York, Boston, Baltimore, Toronto, and Tampa are my projected finish for that division. I think that's kind of I don't want to say an easy division to pick, but I think it kind of seems like, if everything plays out the way, we've talked, it seems like it's a pretty, I don't want to say set in stone, but it kind of is,
Yeah, I generally share your assumptions, but I'm going to say that I believe that I'm going to flip-flop Boston and Baltimore. But here's the thing. I will go New York, Baltimore, Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay. I got 3 teams coming out of the playoffs, or 3 teams coming out of this division for the playoffs, and Boston is one of them. Last year, we saw 3 teams come out of the AL Central. There's not a chance that happens again.
Yeah.
New York, Boston, and Baltimore will all make the playoffs. Print that shit right now.
Same here. That's what I had said that earlier. Yeah, I'm with you.
Like, I don't think that Boston, and I don't think that Baltimore is going to beat them out by a lot. I think that they'll ultimately finish 1 or 2 games, separating. I actually think that New York is going to, it'll come down the stretch on who's going to end up on top. But I suspect that New York will edge out Baltimore, and Baltimore will edge out Boston. But all 3 of them will find themselves in the playoffs come October.
I agree. I think it's a situation where the Yankees are they win it by 2 or 3 games. Yeah. And then Boston and Baltimore are separated by a game and a half or a game, or not a game and a half. You can't have a game and a half. It's either going to be a game or, a game or 2.
Right.
Something like that. I can't see it being, that's going to be the closest battle is that 2 and 3 spot. But again, I'm with you. I got those 3 teams making the playoffs as well.
Yeah, and we will further discuss the rest of the divisions as we move forward. But I think that this is back to being the absolute cream of the crop in the American League, and I dare to say that Toronto and Tampa Bay will find themselves with records that reflect playoff teams should, if they were in other divisions. I think that the AL East is going to get back to being that just absolute powerhouse where they beat up on each other, and that, everybody's got to slide in somewhere. But if they played in separate, different divisions, you'd be talking about a Tampa Bay competing for a wild card spot, or a Toronto being in first, or whatever it may be. Because I think the Central takes a little bit of a step back from having those 3 in, and you pick a team. Cleveland, Detroit, or the Royals are going. I'm not asking you to do that right now, but I'm just saying in general, one of those 3 teams is going to fall back hard, and allow Boston and Baltimore to both get in from the AL East.
Yep,
so
exactly.
That is going to do it for the AL East. I know that we had some college ball to discuss, though, because Xavier and the rest of the country back in action. this past week, as we discussed on our show last week. Chris, tell the people what Xavier did.
Well, Xavier ended up, they finished 2-2. They went 2-1 over the weekend. They did play today against Oregon State. They dropped the first game on Friday to Oregon State, but then rebounded with victories over number 25 Indiana and then UNLV. And then sadly they got blown out today by Oregon State. But that's, again, like we talked on the show last week, that Xavier is, they're one hell of a program that they will play anyone, anywhere. They don't care. And taking on 2 games with Oregon State is, that's a great way to kick off the 2025 season for the Musketeers. But 2-1 on the weekend out in Arizona, solid showing. Ultimately, like I said, dropping a game to Oregon State again today to basically finish 2-2 to start off. But the big news in college baseball, though, and locally, is the Cincinnati Bearcats. For the first time in program history, they are ranked in the Division I or in D1 baseball's top 25 rankings. They come in at number 25 today. Huge news. Some people are, many people are going to be like, oh, it's just the top 25 ranking. This is big for the Cincinnati Bearcats, a program that has, slowly gained traction over time. But this was a team that a lot of people, I listened to a lot of college baseball content. We had JP on, who, former Bearcat himself, last week. There was high hopes going into their opening series on the road at Duke, and Cincinnati took 2 or 3 games. Should have swept the series. They ended up losing on Saturday 6-5 before blowing the doors off of Duke yesterday. It was like 19-5. But they took 2 or 3 on the road from an ACC school, and like JP had mentioned, the ACC is one of the perennial powerhouse conferences. They're one of the Big Four conferences in college baseball, and to take a series on the road against the 11th ranked team in the country, props on Jordan Bischel and the Cincinnati Bearcats, which is only going to make things better when UC and Cincinnati meet up, along with what we see from Miami and NKU. They play in an event called the Joe Nuxhall Classic. It's Miami, Wright State, Xavier, and Cincinnati, and they play all over. They play, I think they play it at Xavier. It's at Cincinnati. They play at Prasco and Mason. So get a chance, check it out. It's really cool. You will see college games at Prasco Park here in Mason all year. The Big East tournament's held at Prasco Park. Check it out. And again, if you get a chance, if you're locally to, buy a college baseball program, check it out. It's phenomenal. And what we're seeing right now between Cincinnati and Xavier is great, because it's quality baseball in this area, and it's just continuing to grow. And those 2 programs needed a shout out, for what they've done to start off the season. And we are headed into, I think they've got some midweek games. I know Cincinnati opens up at home. They had a cancellation, and now they're opening up with Bowling Green this weekend for a game. So that'll be interesting in the 20-degree weather here in Cincinnati that we're going to have. But, I mean, again, props to these 2 programs. Again, huge results to kick off the 2025 season. So props on Cincinnati and Xavier. Well done, guys, and keep it up.
Yeah, no, I look forward to after last week's show, definitely paying more attention to start this year, and then keeping an eye out for certain things that we talked about with JP. So exciting to see, and plus, the games that matter being played when spring training is just getting underway for the big leagues. The college is now underway and kicked off, and these games count. So, baseball is back, and it's always good to watch 2 teams compete for in games that count for records. So I am enjoying what I've seen so far out of college ball, and look forward to keep following that as we go forward. But I think that's going to do it for us tonight. The 3-team division from the playoffs last year that somehow inexplicably got in there. Don't think that it'll be the same this year, but we'll talk more about those teams next week. We appreciate you for joining us. This has been another episode of Backwards K Baseball. You can find us everywhere that you find all of your favorite podcasts. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. The Impact Sports Cincinnati Podcasting Network, as well as the Craft Brewed Sports Podcasting Network. Excuse me. And, of course, we're here every week on YouTube. We go live. You guys are more than welcome to join us, and we appreciate you joining us. For Chris, I am Scott. This has been Backwards K. You guys have a good night, and we'll catch you next week.